Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Convo Couch. And today I have a special guest. He's also a fam, he's also a friend, and his name is Cullen Tiernan. And he was Tulsi Gabbard's press assistant during this last election cycle. Hi, Cullen. How are you?
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And you were the winner of yesterday's ROKFIN exclusive trivia challenge. How do you feel?
Feel like I remember my neoliberal quotes pretty well.
Yeah, it's hard to tell those neoliberals apart, isn't it?
It was, yeah. Normally the Midwest was a key sign that like this is Klobuchar, and then anything that was over wordy and seemed like it was progressive, but there was just something off. You could tell that was Warren.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you had fun. I'm the other champion, two-time champion. So I guess you and I and whoever else wins will have a head-to-head sometime. But I just want to start off by just chatting about how you feel right now with the current state of the country. There's a pandemic. We're sort of starting to reopen in some states. Some people are not for that. Some people have been against the quarantine the whole time. What is your sentiment right now with the pandemic and also the economic situation, which so many people are unemployed? I mean, it's insane how many people filed for unemployment in California. There are reports saying that about half of Californians are unemployed, that these numbers nationally are going to increase. How do you feel about where we are right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty intensely personal for me because I ended up through campaigning in New Hampshire and then coming down to Virginia and then getting stuck with my parents. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been quarantining with them as a 35-year-old, like doing all of their taxes and organizing their house and finding ways to stay busy. But I mean, in a way, it's good. I mean, I hope a lot of people are spending more time with their family and, spending time on the phone and calling people that you haven't been able to call and really trying to use the best of what we have to, what we're still able to do, like get out into nature, go camping. I think I'm gonna try to do that, like obviously practicing social distancing with
Yeah.
no one around you. I am a little anxious. I mean, I think Georgia's been dominating the headlines for
Mm-hmm.
trying to do fast, and to me that seems like they're going after people that they don't want to be on the unemployment rolls by forcing
Yeah.
them back into work when it's not ready, and that's very dangerous. And I mean, it's just interesting to watch. I mean, weirdly enough, I'm watching a lot more of the Trump press conferences. Like, I
Interesting.
guess because my parents do. I don't know. It's just some of it's kind of entertaining too. I mean, working for Tulsi, I obviously dealt with the media a lot, and like
Yeah.
each time, it's like he's always going to be adversarial with the media unless they're kind of giving him softball questions.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting to watch and to happen in real time during a pandemic. But they were against what Georgia was doing, which I thought was refreshing and
Yeah.
kind of good to hear. And I hope that I mean, nobody dies unnecessarily in Georgia
Yeah.
when it comes down to it. I mean, I think Tulsi's been doing a really good job in Hawaii. I've been seeing the memes about Jaws, and like the local elections are important. Look at the mayor in the first Jaws is in charge in the second Jaws,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that there are a lot of people who are more concerned with the tourist industries
Yeah.
than they are with like human life. And to me, that's pretty bad priorities.
Yeah,
So,
that seems to like a lot of America too, to be honest. But so you were Tulsi's press assistant. What was it like in terms of dealing with the media and the press and others, especially during the times when she was really coming out and attacking the establishment?
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There was an article that just came out from the New York Times about where I kind of called it out online about them attacking Believe Women
Mm-hmm.
after they promoted it for when the Supreme Court was in,
Christine Blasey
yeah,
Ford. Yeah.
they believed her, but they don't believe people accusing Biden, which is highly suspect and shows that their motives might not have been good in the first place. But the same New York Times opinion people, when Hillary Clinton wore a white pantsuit, it was like, wow, she is all that is woman. And when Tulsi does it, it's like, this is horrible and creepy and I don't like it. and
Yeah.
and so it's just kind of like when you get into the weeds of that stuff and you see that, like, they really, really can take the same exact thing and give you a 180-degree different opinion about it. And just like, I mean, what maybe was most personal, and I think why Tulsi did the defamation lawsuit against
Mm-hmm.
Hillary, was because, I mean, like, Tulsi and I both served in the military. We're both veterans of the Iraq War, and we're both getting politically active for the reason of ending these wars and calling it out. And then to have somebody who used to be the Secretary of State question your allegiance to your own country
Yeah.
is beyond absurd. And
Yeah. With no
and
proof either. With just nothing there, you know?
and it was the weirdest part about it too, was then like they tried to rewrite that history pretty quickly and deny that she said that that
Right.
implication that she's a Russian asset. And like, I was working with like the media people in general, and like I was like, are you guys really going along with this? Like, you can listen to this clear as day. And they're like, well, it's a little bit vague, and she's talking about Jill Stein and not necessarily Tulsi. And he's just kind of like, wow, like, the New York Times is taking orders from somebody. Like, this is not like a conspiracy. This is happening right in
Yeah.
front of your face.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you were a Bernie 2016 delegate. I've known you from the Bernie movement. What made you support Tulsi in 2020 versus Sanders in particular?
Well, so one thing, I was a Bernie delegate, and I was one of the ones that protested no more wars and yelled it until I didn't have a voice anymore, with a bunch of other really diehards from California.
Mm-hmm.
And I just guess I felt like we were kind of left out in the dust through that experience. And like, afterwards, it was just kind of like there wasn't any real reaching out to that grassroots, like, phenomenal team of brilliant activists all over the country that had, really gone out of their way to not only get to Philadelphia, but like play the game to the point of spending $5,000 to share bad hotel rooms in Philadelphia with four other people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, so we really went out of our way to do that, and I didn't feel like that was ever there was no reciprocity there. And then I stayed in, and I got super involved with the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And ended up becoming the chair of the Veterans Caucus of the California Democratic Party. But it still was like, it didn't feel like there was that reach out. And then Tulsi was very different. She was willing to reach out and come to like a progressive meeting in Fremont, California, and do like all the grassroots stuff that like people do in New Hampshire, but do it in California.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that really impressive. And also, my main motivation in politics is to end our wars.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, her message is the heart of like why I'm involved in politics. And I'm 100% with Bernie on healthcare, and I think both of them are like leading the way in terms of clean money politics, which is absolutely necessary for us
Mm-hmm.
to change the situation as it is. But for me, like, day in and day out, like, I want to be like, it's almost cathartic or therapeutic for me to be challenging the war industry,
Yeah.
and specifically the Democrats who are pro-war. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know you're anti war. And one of the things that people have criticized about Tulsi is that she is um, against regime change wars, but have questioned whether she is actually anti war just based on how she was a veteran. She's very patriotic. What is your response to that? Do you believe that Tulsi is anti-war, and how do you grapple between being somebody that is proud to serve their country but also doesn't want any more of these wars?
Well, I think that there are a lot of people who are. I mean, I don't know if everyone. Or, did you see the movie The Big Lebowski?
I think I've seen it a long time ago, but
There's one of the
uh,
main characters is a Vietnam veteran,
mm,
and he talks about how somebody has emotional problems beyond pacifism, right? And
mhm.
and I think that, like, I am against war, and I understand that all of these wars are for profit, not for the national security of our country. And I
Yeah,
think that people who are against war and come at it from a place of this is bad for, for humanity, or come at it from a place of this is bad for our country, or come at it from a place of this is even bad for our economy because we're not spending at home. I mean, whatever your motivation is that you're coming from, I don't think that we should fight each other about, like, well, you're not pure enough, or you're not exactly as ideological as I am. I think
yeah,
that, and it's painful to me in a way, because I mean, part of why I bring up Vietnam is like, the same generation that protested that war and saw all of the lies, saw all of the unnecessary suffering, the bombing of children, all of these things that are so horrific. And then just 20 years later, we're doing the same. 30 years later, we're involved in a never-ending war
Yeah.
in countries that we have no business being in. And I mean, when we do leave Afghanistan, it'll be the same essentially as when we showed up. And people have been having conflict there for a very long time, and to think that we can show up and blow things up and have hegemony is the height of hubris. So I think that people should work together better, and regardless of where your motives are, like we need to build a broad coalition to end these wars, because we haven't so far. And when we fight amongst each other and nitpick each other for not being ideologically pure, then we're nowhere near closer to ending these wars than we were when we started.
Yeah, and that seems like a problem with a lot of the left. Like they're unwilling to really go outside their echo chamber. Many instances where Tulsi applauded somebody like Meghan McCain, who really hated her in the beginning, or applauded somebody on the right. She got pretty much framed as being alt right, like as being a Republican. So what do you think about that? Because I know you're a Democrat, obviously. You're highly involved in the Democratic Party. So what do you like? How do we go around that from the left? Because it seems like the left, if you aren't, I agree with you, if you aren't ideologically right on agreeing to what they say, they are just very, very adamant of saying ill no, like we can't have any people that are conservative, we can't talk to them. And I feel like that's so sad, because also that's what causes Democrats to continuously lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because certainly a lot of the behavior and language and the personalities from the White House are very toxic. But
Yeah,
then to meet that with a toxicity of your own is like doubling down on the same problem. And
that's a good
I mean,
point.
I see a lot of people online all the time who hate Trump so much that they wish violence on him, that they wish all of these things, which is like, if you're coming from a place of love or like peace and aloha with
Aloha.
Tulsi, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not going to want to like have other people like die or suffer or anything bad to happen. You want
Yeah.
people to
Well,
eventually come together.
yeah. I mean, I think there's a limit to that. I mean, for me personally, like I don't really wish violence against people, but there's a point where I'm like I'm out with the Democrats right now, and that I'm like, Jesus, like I just want to like eat the rich. But Hillary Clinton, she she pretty much controls the entire Democratic establishment, right? She pretty much has so much say, just like Obama. And was Hillary Clinton's treatment of and subsequently the establishment's treatment of Tulsi a factor, a huge factor in how you guys proceeded? And did people target you specifically because of that?
I mean, I think she mostly operates behind the scenes. I mean, I do agree with you that there are a lot of powerful players. I mean, just look at what happened on Super Tuesday, right? It's
Right.
like we had this really robust, most diverse amount of candidates ever, blase blase, and then clearly there was machinations going behind the scenes. And one of the more interesting tweets I saw come out of that was that a lot of these campaigns had the same legal advisors, like the same law
Yeah.
firm had been hired by so many of these campaigns that seemed to coalesce around Biden at the most opportune time. And so I just feel like there was a lot of that people might not be privy to, that just kind of is very unhealthy for the democratic process,
Yeah.
and especially for having like trust and transparency and feeling like we have the strongest candidate to take on the machine of the Republican Party, that that doesn't have like the fractures and all
Yeah.
of the, because I mean they have been successful in rallying around their 2016 outcast candidate who was very much against the establishment at first,
Yeah.
before he won. Like, I mean, people from Lindsey Graham to all like quite a few prominent Republicans were just saying the most horrible, horrible things about Trump until he won, and then
Yeah.
they're
And
all
then they
kissing the ring.
coalesced.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
for us,
something we can't do. apparently.
It's and it's, I mean, part of it I think is because, like, the grassroots on the right got their candidate, and so like the activists and people who are excited to go knock doors and they're excited to get on the internet, and I just don't see. I mean, I don't. I think maybe you've shown this, but like the level of excitement right now around Biden is like less than 20%.
It's like negative. Yeah. Yeah, it's really really bad. Speaking of, Biden's campaign, a lot of people thought, "Oh yeah, like he had a good ground game," when you can see like absolutely he had zero ground game. Bernie Sanders had a lot of ground game. And in reference to Tulsi's campaign, I know it was a much smaller campaign than the other two. How is there anything you feel like you guys could have done better? Maybe if you had more resources or whatever the case. But if is there anything that you feel like for next time, perhaps, or that you guys could improve on?
I mean, I think from a communications point of view, we were able to have a tremendous impact with like you're saying, a very lean and mean grassroots team. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I got to spend time in Iowa and New Hampshire, and I was actually in Iowa right after the storm with Hillary started,
Yeah.
and everywhere I went, like people were treating us like we just won the election. Like, I went to a tailgate, and like
Yeah.
it was a really cool feeling. And so I think one of a lot of people, that might be in our circles, they know Tulsi pretty well now, but you have to take a step back and think the massive amounts of Americans are not super politicos and not super politically engaged.
Yeah.
So for her to go from a congresswoman from a state with like I think 1.3 million people
Mm-hmm.
to a nationally recognized name, and like is a tremendous accomplishment, and something that I'm really happy to have been a part of, and like to my way played like a pretty significant role, because like you're saying, we're a small team, and interacting with the media was something I was doing like, yeah, a lot all day long.
Yeah. I think she managed to do really well as far as the media, because the media was constantly attacking her, but in their attacks, they made her more popular because they were like just continuously talking about her. And the things she said were like direct attacks on the establishment. And I think that's what a lot of people really liked about her, specifically in comparison to Bernie Sanders. Now, Tulsi endorsed Joe Biden. Um, but then, subsequently, not long after, Bernie Sanders did himself. How did you feel about her endorsement to Biden? And also, do you feel like she knew that Bernie was going to endorse Biden? It just seemed to all happen very soon. And she got a lot of hate for that. A lot of people criticized her, saying that she sold out, she did something that she wasn't supposed to do, because he does oppose everything she stands for, right? So how did you feel about that personally?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when Tulsi takes controversial stances. I experience it on my social media platforms
Yeah.
in a very direct way, as like a lot of people can't, talk to her about it. I mean, honestly, it was like divided feelings. Like part of me was kind of almost happy because there was so much nonsense that she was going to run third party, and that
Yeah.
was like part of this,
True.
like the messages from the Kremlin that she was getting to defeat the Democrat. And it's just like there's one of my favorite quotes in a BuzzFeed article that I was mentioned in is they called me indignant about this third party question because she got it so often.
Yeah.
Like it just was just nonstop. And I think they had flown the BuzzFeed reporter down to South Carolina just to ask this question again. And it's like I was basically saying, like, what does she have to do? Stand on the ceiling upside down and
Yeah.
like that say, like, in Latin and then all these languages that are maybe more memorable, like, I'm not going to do this. And so like
They would
so
have thought she was a demon if she did it in Latin, just so you know.
yeah, maybe Spanish or maybe a language that's more prevalent. But yeah, basically, I'm just saying, like, something, a way to make it more memorable and for
Yeah.
people to trust that she's telling the truth, which she clearly was. And then another thing too is, like, I mean, and this is kind of what I've been thinking a lot is, she's running in the Democratic Party. Like she like they're a part of an organization that's bigger than themselves at the end of the day, and like she's respecting the will of the Democratic voters. If regardless of how we feel about it, this is where we are, and this is what they picked. And so I think that what was more important and more pressing is the response to the virus in Hawaii and making sure that nobody died unnecessarily. So that was an emergency on her hand. So the campaign had to end, and she had to, follow through on what she said she was going to do, and then get to work in Hawaii, preventing more people from dying. So it just was kind of a weird. I mean, it still is a weird time with what's happening with COVID, and like it being like up to governors, and governors having different motivations,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, it just, yeah, even with Bernie too. I mean, it makes me sick to see people in Wisconsin getting sick now, because they were forcing this to happen in a way that was dangerous for American people and like absurd in a way. And so I could kind of understand where Bernie was coming from. Like, if I was running and I was had that guilt on my conscience that people were getting sick, I might make that same decision too.
I mean, true, but it's also known now that he was talking to Biden for weeks, even before the Wisconsin primary, knowing that people were still going to go out, even though he told people not to go out and vote. He knew that people were probably going to go out, and a lot of the people in Wisconsin that are my friends, they were, they're upset at him because he knowingly didn't drop out till after that and had been in talks with Biden. And the reason I ask about the Tulsi endorsement of Biden is because she did reveal that she spoke to the Bernie Sanders campaign, didn't really specify what it was, but I mean, in this point, what Bernie did kind of frees her, because he really was planning on endorsing Biden for a long time. And I think that also just goes to show that she was willing to really just pretty much do what what was right from the beginning, and she got a lot of hate for that. I mean, I still think, Bernie and Tulsi represent anti-establishment. They represent, the people, the revolution, the 2016 contingent of folks who were really sick and tired of the Democratic Party. And though I think that, people that like them, that are very empathetic, got like manipulated in a way by the Democratic Party, because they put you between a rock and a sword, when they're like, well, people are dying, but at the same time, they're pushing these elections through. They're pushing these primaries through just to make sure Joe Biden becomes a nominee. So, I mean, I think that I understand what where that mindset comes from. I still think like it would have been cool to say like, no, what, I'm just not going to endorse anybody, whether both of the ends, because people are just looking for that, like, that person that takes the gloves off. And she was that person. She was the person that took the gloves off more than Bernie Sanders. And people were like expecting her to be like, bam, like, no. And when she did it, they were just like shocked. And I think that's also goes back to the process where a lot of us are already like done with the Democratic Party, and people like Bernie and Tulsi are still like trying to reform it. They're still trying to work within the party. And I think it's something that people have to accept, that they're trying to reform it.
Yeah, and I think any successful strategy has to involve both people inside and people outside the Democratic Party. I mean, the problem I have with it is a lot of people think like by leaving the Democratic Party, they can somehow influence the Democratic Party to change. And I don't think that's how it works. I think that like they are happy enough to have you leave because they consolidate power more quickly with nobody in the room to raise the flag, or to call BS. If there's nobody of good conscience there, and it's just big moneyed interests, which is what it's been for a very long time. I mean, in California, I think it's kind of the most like vivid of like, you can go to a meeting of the California Democratic Party, and you can go to a caucus meeting and see activists and see all what's going on. And then at the same venue at 7 o'clock at night, they're going to have a dinner with Adam Schiff and all of the military industrial complex people and all of the people who want to spend $5,000 to have a silver plate at a dinner table. And I mean, those are radically different groups of people. And there's one that's dominated the power structure for a very long time.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I do see that, but I just kind of like, I just feel like, I think at some level, like I said, locally, people, I don't have an issue, people working, trying to like have some eyes and some opposition in the Democratic Party. But I think at a certain point, it's like, we are giving them some sort of power by continuously voting for their candidate, no matter what that candidate does, and no matter like how many times we have unfair elections, we're still continuing to try to like work with them. And it's like an abusive relationship where if I had somebody that was constantly abusing me, I wouldn't continue trying to work with that person. I would leave and gain my power outside. And I think like the idea of dem exit without a plan will fail. I think the plan has to be to, right now that we have a mass pandemic, like a mass economic depression, would be great to just go outside the party and outside the entire electorate. I'm not even talking about third parties. I'm talking about like mass movements of people. And I think we're seeing that happen with a general strike. And I'd love to see something like the Yellow Vest movement kind of evolve from this, because there's a lot of people being affected by the, the failings of our system, and they're actually being propelled into action. And I've never seen something like that. I mean, not in the longest time. And I think it's something that we could take advantage of. I don't think it matters whether you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever. I think we just need a united front of a movement. Eventually, all those people could go into multiple parties. I look forward to a multi-party system. Eventually, that's fair. But right now, what we're looking at is the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are just two sides of the same coin. They have a hold, and they're not gonna like let anybody else in. So it's kind of difficult to navigate those waters.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about that yesterday, and my mind
Yeah.
kept going back to Occupy Wall Street and like how much energy and excitement there was around there. But really, in my opinion, you still need political leadership, or you need some kind of leadership to rally people around.
Yeah.
And maybe that's kind of a little bit where your frustrations are coming with, like, the people who we could see that possibly being that are still so far involved in the government as it is right now,
Yeah.
that they have other responsibilities besides
Right.
taking over a massive movement. So yeah, that's, I mean, it's interesting to have inherited the system. I remember after the DNC in 2016 going to Washington, D.C. to go to the National Archives and just thinking about how Roman we are, like in the way we
Yeah.
approach things, and how better it would be if we could be more Greek,
Yeah.
and like have that more like vibrant culture of like multiple ideas and music and arts and all of the muses. And instead, it's like very like we're centered around money and the military.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. And we are pretty much Rome before the fall. What is your opinion on the way the Sanders campaign was run this time around? I know you were part of the Tulsi campaign, but you were running in these circles where you saw all these politicians and these different campaigns, because I'm sure you've seen some ex-Sanders staffers and volunteers kind of come out and talk about the bad management, the abuse, and the top-down sort of hierarchy. What's your opinion on that? Do you feel like that actually contributed to perhaps his campaign not being the same campaign as 2016?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I mean, there's another thing I've been thinking about too. Is like in 2016, not only did he have that amazing moment with the bird, but like he also had like moments where he challenged Hillary Clinton's friendship with Henry Kissinger, and like was much more defining a different foreign policy. Whereas Joe Biden voted for the war in Iraq, and I never had like a strong moment where he was like in
Yeah.
public during a debate, like, listen, like, how many people are dead in Iraq because of your vote? Like, how can you have the authenticity or the integrity to say that you should be president now after making that horrible decision that caused so many people's lives? And having a powerful moment like that never really came around. And it did seem that a lot of the people he hired, and part of why I think I was attracted to working for Tulsi in a more grassroots style campaign, was it was much more of the kind of people with big egos and like very much about themselves. And like, yeah, I've definitely been watching a lot of what's been coming out, like the screenshots of like the director in California like saying super inappropriate things to people he didn't hire, and just kind of creating a bad will. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I obviously we all wish things had ended differently, and part of me is like I'm still learning politics. I mean, one of the good things to admit is how much you don't know about all this stuff, because it is a lot of relationships and things that go back many years. And I mean, I guess in a positive way, another thing that came out from us talking yesterday is to look at, when Jesse Jackson ran, and essentially Bernie, in my opinion, is carrying on that torch, and like Shirley Chisholm and like the people who were, conscientiously critiquing certain aspects of the Democratic Party while running to be the standard bearer for the party. And
Right.
people, I guess a lot of them right now are not fully awake to understand what's happening there, and just like don't feel good about it and want to go back to like way things were before Trump. Where I
Right,
don't
like
think,
Obama.
yeah, and I don't think that there's any going back. And I don't think
Mm,
that we should also look at that as nostalgically as we do, because
right.
Obama deported a lot of people. Obama launched new
Millions.
wars. Like a lot of bad things happened that we like. It's almost like you can't even talk about the failures of the ACA, and like the fact that poor people had to pay a tax penalty for not having health insurance when the health insurance that they were offered was really bad.
Yeah.
And just like, so it forced you into this weird position with the government, where it's like, if you're an honest progressive, you're like, this is not good for poor people, this is hurting the people we need to be helping. And then if you're like a devout Democrat, you're like, Trump is bad, so no
Right.
talk about that stuff, because any kind of dissension amongst the ranks is breaking unity. And even though we're the left, like unity is like, to me, it seems a very kind of like a far right demand for unity.
Yeah. Well, it's
Coming,
not going to happen, I think. I don't think that kind of unity that the neoliberal establishment wants is going to happen this time. I see more people saying they're not voting for Joe Biden than I did in 2016 for Hillary, and it's interesting to see that. I didn't see that as much then, and even I've seen both Tulsi supporters and Bernie supporters say no, we're not voting for Joe Biden, and it doesn't matter how much they ask, and that's something really interesting too, that a lot of people have called Tulsi supporters cultists the same way they've called Bernie supporters cultists. But all that this is proving is that they're not cultists at all, that they're actually not going to follow what, their leader has said, that they're actually going to go against that and really vote third party is what I'm seeing, or vote libertarian, whether it's green, independent, whatever, or not vote. And so we're seeing a little bit of that actual resistance to the corruption, because if we really are honest with ourselves, we know that Trump is a result of the many years of neoliberalism that preceded him. And so if we're not tackling the core issue, then we're always going to be going around in circles trying to avoid somebody like Trump. Ultimately, though, for you, do you feel like there is a lesser of evils argument to vote for somebody like Joe Biden?
I think AOC said this recently, although I think she reversed herself and pledged support to Biden. But I think that there is something to be gained right now in this moment to try to push him in the direction. And I think, honestly, I think it's the only way that he can win. So, like, it's like, please listen to the progressives and like start changing. And you can see him do that a little bit. Like, I don't know. I joked with my friend recently that it's like he's going to offer like 5% off your first student loan, like, like so it's like the wheels are turning, but the powers that be still like only want to give crumbs. And so
Yeah.
like if they were to start changing
Yeah.
and start listening, and like what would be beautiful is like, I mean, we'll see. And I remember this feeling too, like deep in my gut, when Hillary picked Tim Kaine as the VP, and it was just like, why? Like, what do we get out of this? Like, had she picked Bernie, she would have won,
Yeah.
and like the VP for the most part is like a ceremonial role. I mean, like obviously it's an important person, and it's like very close to the heart of power, but uh, before Dick Cheney, it was like not as active of an office,
Yeah.
and so she could have done that, and she didn't, and for whatever reasons, they picked somebody who went on there and spoke broken Spanish and just like insulted like a lot of people just by
I,
talking.
you know
Like,
what, Cullen, and you're right about that. But to be honest, like I just don't know if anything Biden does is going to be seen as genuine to progressives because of the way this whole election went through. And so I think there's a little bit of sentiment to that, as well as the fact that there's no reason for him really to actually go for progressives when the Democrats, I think, are so arrogant that they think they got this no matter what. They think like all these pundits, all these journalists, they think, oh yeah, like they're gonna fall in line, no worries. And I think they're gonna be very surprised when that's not the case. And I honestly don't even think they care to win, to be honest, as long as now they've defeated Sanders, who was the main threat. And I just don't think progressives, I mean, are going to vote. Personally, myself, there's really nothing Joe Biden could do short of being Bernie Sanders to get me to vote for him. And even then, like now, I'm just like, let's say he made Bernie Sanders his VP. That would probably be like the most he could do. But I don't trust the system that put him in there. So it's very hard for some of us who feel that way to like,
sure.
Personally,
I don't think we're getting the warm fuzzies from them that they're going to make those kind of decisions.
yeah.
I'm just kind of like saying like best case scenario, how I could find myself like getting excited or motivated to knock doors or like get involved more with a campaign that I could support.
Yeah, and like honestly, I think I think the way I'm looking at this is that the reason Hillary Clinton, when she lost, a lot of people were shocked and they became more aware and more awake on the things that were happening. And that would have been different, I think, if Donald Trump had lost. I think people would have felt like, oh, it's okay. We defeated the authoritarian fascist, right? We defeated the main problem. And they would have gone back to sleep. Like many people say, they would have gone back to brunch. And I feel like with Joe Biden versus Trump, I feel the same way. I feel like if Joe Biden won, people would be like, "Oh, we defeated fascism, yay!" And they would just like it would. I think it would ultimately kill our movement. And people argue this thing all the time, but I think it would be more effective in the long run for progressives to have an opponent like Donald Trump because Donald Trump is teaching a very valuable lesson to the Democratic Party that he ran as an anti-establishment populist candidate, and the Democratic Party pretty much pushes away those candidates like the Bernies, like the Tulsis, like the people that run on those platforms. And so I think it would actually be a lesson learned. And I mean, I don't know, I'm more of a like screw the party person at this moment, but I just think, yeah, like I think we're at I don't see Biden as a lesser of evils, to be frank. I see, and they're both evil, but I just see Trump as actually like, he doesn't have the baggage. He ran as an anti-interventionist. He's out-lefting the Democrats right now with the COVID stuff. He's saying he's going to give people health care. His numbers are rising. I mean, I think it's going to be very difficult for Democrats to get anywhere. But where do we go from here, Cullen? What's next for you? And also, what do you think people should be doing as far as either politics or just activism in general?
Well, so after 2016, I was very motivated to stay involved because frankly, I didn't like the way I was treated by the Democratic Party. So I wanted them to not just be able to like sweep me away and like shove my voice out of the process, like what they did in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So I got involved locally. And I think that's the best thing to do if you still have energy and you still care and you still want to be a part of like the change that you want to see in the world. And I was actually, I mean, we were tremendously successful on the local level. We got Ro Khanna elected, who ended up becoming one of Bernie's like biggest supporters in Congress. And like when we first met him, I had to like push him to take a photo with a cardboard cutout of Bernie. And he was like, I don't know. I'm like,
Wow.
you're taking the photo. and then like, he is
That's
where
a
he
good
is
story.
now. Yeah. I mean, it was fun too. I mean, and then I ended up becoming his delegate to the county central committee, which is something that like I would hope more people get involved in because I mean, it just kind of like the whole party apparatus. It's not just the DNC. I mean, that's kind of what takes the headlines and everything, but it all like builds up to that point.
Right.
So if we have more people, being willing to spend the many years it takes to get involved and like change it on the local level, is how I think we will ultimately win and have a progressive in the White House. So in California, where in Fremont, there are two campaigns that I'm really excited about. One of them is Vinnie Bacon, who's running for county supervisor, and it's kind of a funny story because that seat had been occupied by an incumbent for 24 years and nobody had challenged him, and he was just like able to do whatever he wanted, no checks and balances. And then as soon as Vinnie like raised the flag, throws his name into the ring, the guy retires. So it's like you got to wonder what skeletons he had in the closet that he didn't want
Yeah.
coming out from an actual campaign. So that alone was good. And then he was able to the establishment threw like a state senator at the race. They threw multiple other council members from cities, and they all lost. And Vinny running on a clean money candidacy, that being his number one like claim to fame, is that in California, like the land is super valuable. Obviously,
Yeah.
the developers are super involved in local politics, and they're willing to throw so much money that they will control entire governments. I mean, one of the more egregious examples of this is in Santa Clara. The San Francisco 49ers moved there, and then they just tried to buy the entire city council, and like that's in liberal progressive Bay Area California. It's
Yeah.
not even in rural California. So having more people get involved and run those kinds of races and support people locally across the Bay. There's a Bernie delegate from 2016 who I met and made friends with, and who I've had one of these conversations with, who is running against Anna Eshoo, who is one of the top big pharma Democrats in the entire country, because Menlo Park is a lot of big pharmaceutical companies. So we're never going to get healthcare for all if we have Democrats like that. So Rishi Kumar, who's running against her, has my complete support, and like I want to get involved and help him. And then one of the conversations we had yesterday too, it's like we have to send signals to the establishment that like business as usual is not cutting it. And if they're not listening on the national level, I mean, you can have a lot of influence in your local on your local level, and it's interesting too. I mean, I'm not like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about it either, because I know the problems with even the state of California, and like and the way the Democratic Party has built it to be
like a mafia. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and also like their checks and balances to prevent any grassroots energy from really attaining true power. And
Exactly.
I mean, and so really what I found is not only do you have to win basically the party's broken up into thirds, and 1/3 is grassroots, 1/3 central committee, and 1/3 appointments by the establishment or the elected officials.
Yeah.
So we have to not only win the grassroots stuff, which we're all capable of doing, or for the most part, unless they throw hundreds of thousands of dollars like they do in San Francisco or LA, where I think a lot of the California can, but we have to win assembly seats. And one of the exciting things where I live, Fremont's divided into two different assembly districts, and in both one, the Bernie supporters won, and they're both young guys. They're both clean money. If they win, suddenly they're going to be able to appoint people to the party, and the party starts to change. So that's Alex Lee and Alexis Villalobos, and both of those guys, I donated to them because they were just on the last Fun Progressive meeting. But those are the people who I want to be supporting, and if they do win, then Anthony Randon has a lot more conversations to have. I mean, I know James Alaya, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean he's an amazing human being, but also just a brilliant whistleblower, right?
Yeah.
Like he went through that whole process, took on one of the nastier Republicans. So you would think that the Democratic establishment would be super thankful and super supportive, and instead he got more support from Justice Democrats than he did from the Democratic Party. And he also, when he had meetings with them, they were like, well, you're gonna have to take big tobacco money, or like you're gonna have to take this shitty money. And it's like, well, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
then
it's difficult to navigate the waters of the Democratic Party in general, which is why I think like so many people are turned off by it, because it just seems like they block access to people every single time to progressives, like you said. Like it just makes it impossible. And like I just think, like I'm all for people who like you who are doing what they can. My friends here, Melissa Michelson is one of those people that's in Central Committee now.
Amazing.
And I think I've seen like the whispers of the progressives, but they always change the rules and flip it. So these, to keep progressives out of power. It'll be interesting to see that as it develops. But do you plan on working anywhere else once this whole pandemic's over? Where can we find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously this kind of ended abruptly because of the pandemic, so I've kind of been stuck in Virginia since then.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to work for more clean money campaigns. Like I'm gonna support all the clean money candidates I can. I'm not in this for money, so like I'm not trying to get like a Joe Biden type job. Like I want to stay
Yeah.
with the people and help in whatever ways see fit. Like, but part of another thing that I really like is getting involved in New Hampshire and Iowa, because both of those places are just so tremendously important. And and we talked about this a little bit too, but it's interesting how like they shut down the importance of Iowa through the Shadow app and through their machinations, and like waiting until 2 weeks later to announce Bernie won. So by then the news is old news, and like people are already talking about New Hampshire and South Carolina, but still like those are still going to be important, and they still control so much of like who is viable and all of that. So yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in any opportunities that present themselves there. But yeah, I'm just kind of like waiting for this to be. I can't even travel back to California, to be honest. Every time,
No?
every flight that I've gotten has gotten canceled.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I thought I didn't think it was that bad anymore. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't think it was that bad anymore. Okay, so we got some super chats, Johnny? Okay. We got some super chats from the people watching. We're just going to go over them.
Cool.
Okay. I'm supposed to go to Florida soon. I hope that flight doesn't get canceled.
Oh yeah, I was just watching the governor of Florida talk about how they've employed the.
Oh, he's great. He's wonderful. He's my favorite.
American classic.
All right, so we got a super chat from Pasta. It says, I don't roll during Shomer Chavez.
Yes. He knows Walter Sobchak. The Big Lebowski reference.
Oh, yeah, he's a fan.
Yeah.
Let's see. Another super chat was from... Another one from Pasta. Cullen has worked for two of my favorite candidates, Tulsi and Maria Estrada. Thanks, Cully.
Oh, yeah, I forgot you worked for her.
Oh yeah, I like I said, I like to volunteer for everyone, and it was fun. I mean, she's a firebrand for sure. So creating memes about her, and we were talking about Anthony Randon. Like she was, she was going for the heart of their power.
Yeah, I mean, she made it through, but again, I think there's shenanigans in some of these races. I mean, they're trying really hard to keep her down. So,
Rocky Bellinger. I just wanted to thank Colin Tiernan for working for Tulsi. He is a really good guy. I also want to thank the Convo Couch fam for covering her campaign by showing up to her town halls. Respect.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah,
Colin's a good Tulsel. just joking, guys. I love Cullen.
Brent McKinney. I second what Rocky said.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you guys for the super chat contributions. Cullen, where can we find you online, social media?
Well, actually, that's kind of funny because 2 days ago, Twitter, for no apparent reason, suspended my account. I had to go basically kind of go back and forth with them, and they ended up reactivating it. Well, with like a super threatening email that like, if you do this again, we will permanently deactivate your account. And like, I'm like still unsure what I did. Like,
you're a Russian asset.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. Besides my associations with Vladimir, but yeah. So Cullen Yossarian on Twitter, and then Cullen Tiernan on Facebook, and Cullen for Tulsi on Instagram are my main social media platforms.
Awesome. Cullen, thank you very much for doing this interview. Thank you for answering the questions. I'm sure people have plenty of more questions, but thanks so much. And thank you for what you did for Tulsi's campaign. It was nice seeing you everywhere. It was good seeing, somebody from California, somebody that's progressive, really be on the ground and do the things that needed to happen. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was always great seeing you guys too, especially in New Hampshire. That was a real treat.
Yeah, that was fun. All right, Cullen.
All right.
Thanks so much. And thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Check us out on ROKFIN, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Cool. Until next
CONVO
time.
out.
Aloha.
Bye,
Aloha.
fams.
Peace.
Aloha.